Imagine waking up at 3 in the morning in a small steel cabin, 4 decks above an engine room the size of a city block. The ship is somewhere in the middle of the North Pacific, with no land for over 1,000 miles in any direction. Outside the porthole, there is nothing at all. Inside the cabin, there is almost nothing either. There is just the gentle hum of the main engine coming up through the bulkhead, and a small panel of green lights mounted 6 feet from your pillow. Now, most people picture a ship's engine room as a place that needs constant attention. They imagine a dozen people in coveralls, hands on wrenches, eyes on gauges, but on a modern container ship at 3 in the morning, there is nobody down there. There is not a single person. How does one engineer, sleeping in a small cabin, keep a 1,000-foot ship alive through the night? That is exactly what we are going to find out today. Hi, my name is Jack, and this is Life at Sea, the channel where we go inside the lives of the people who live and work at sea. Now, before we get into this, I want to be clear about something. We are not talking about a small tug or a coastal vessel where there is always somebody on duty in the engine room. We are talking about a large, deep-sea container ship, the kind of vessel operated by companies like Maersk, Hapag-Lloyd, CMA CGM, or NYK Line. These ships run around 1,000 feet long, and they cross entire oceans on a single voyage. On a vessel like that, the engine room runs unattended from early evening to early morning, with the entire weight of all that machinery resting on a single engineer in the accommodation block. So how does that actually work? Let me start with what is actually running below his feet at night. On a modern container ship of this size, the engine room is not really a room at all. It is a multi-deck industrial space at the stern of the vessel, often 6 or 7 floor plates deep, beginning below the waterline. At the center of it is the main engine. On Maersk's largest Triple-E class vessels, that means 2 MAN B&W ultra-long-stroke 2-stroke diesels, each with 8 cylinders and an 800mm bore rated at almost 30 megawatts each. On the newer Antonia Maersk class, it is a single-man B&W dual-fuel engine with a 95-centimeter cylinder bore, big enough that a grown man can stand inside one cylinder, and tall enough that the engine itself spans multiple floors of the engine room. Around the main engine sits everything else. 3 or 4 large auxiliary diesel generators produce the ship's electrical power. An auxiliary boiler keeps the heavy fuel oil heated to combustion viscosity. Fuel oil purifiers and lube oil purifiers spin continuously, separating water and impurities out of the fuel before it ever reaches the cylinders. A freshwater generator distills drinking water from seawater. Air compressors charge the starting air bottles. Pumps push cooling water, ballast, bilge, and fire main supplies around the ship. The steering gear sits 2 decks down at the stern, and on a container ship, the refrigerated container plant keeps thousands of reefer boxes at the right temperature. Now imagine all of that running simultaneously at 3 in the morning, with the closest other ship maybe 20 miles away and the closest port 4 or 5 days behind you. The noise around the main engine can reach roughly 110 decibels, loud enough that ear defenders are mandatory anywhere near the engine flat. Temperatures on the upper engine room platforms regularly sit well above 40 degrees Celsius. On a typical Asia to Europe transit, a Triple-E ship will burn around 80 cubic meters of heavy fuel oil per day, day after day, for weeks. And if any of it stops, if there is a blackout in the middle of the night, you have suddenly turned 200,000 tons of steel and cargo into a drifting object in active shipping lanes. Ask any old chief engineer who has done a Trans-Pacific run, and they will tell you the same thing. The achievement they are most proud of at the end of a contract is not a particular repair, It is the long, quiet weeks where nothing happened because everything they set up worked. And honestly, when you stand on the floor plates and look up at that main engine running, it is a slightly humbling thing. The whole reason any of this is possible comes down to a system called unattended machinery spaces, or UMS for short. UMS is a formal class notation issued by classification societies like Det Norske Veritas and Lloyd's Register under the Safety of Life at Sea Convention in Chapter 2, Part 1, Regulations 46 to 53. Without that endorsement on the ship's certificate of class, the engine room legally cannot be left unmanned. With that certification in place, the ship can run unattended below for up to 16 consecutive hours, and the entire engine room can be monitored from a single panel. What the certification requires is genuinely impressive. Oil mist detectors sit on every main engine cylinder above 2,250 kilowatts or with a bore over 300 millimeters, ready to catch a developing crankcase explosion before it happens. Bilge wells have high-level alarms and automatic bilge pumps, so a leak in the middle of the night triggers itself. Automatic standby generators start means if the running generator drops out, another is on the bus bars within seconds. An emergency generator starts itself and reconnects automatically in a full blackout. Fire detection covers boiler air supply casings, scavenge spaces, oil handling areas, and basically every square meter that could plausibly catch fire. A remote-operated fire extinguishing system can be triggered from outside the machinery space. The standard window for unattended operation runs from around 5 in the evening to 7 the next morning. Day work runs from 8 in the morning to 5 in the evening, and the engine room then goes unattended overnight. 2 safety rounds are conducted each day, one before the engine room is handed over and one late in the evening, which is, honestly, a beautifully clever piece of design when you stop and look at it. Now let me talk about the alarm panel 6 feet from his bunk. This is the heart of the whole system. Every certified ship has what is called the extension alarm system. It is essentially a network of small alarm panels distributed through the accommodation. There is one in the duty engineer's cabin, one in the chief engineer's cabin, one on the bridge, and others in the officer's mess, the engineer's duty mess, the smoking room, and the gym. Anywhere the duty engineer might reasonably be when an alarm comes in, there is a panel. The duty engineer's cabin panel is the central one. It is mounted within arm's reach of the bunk, often on the bulkhead above the desk. When something happens in the engine room, the panel lights up, a soft chime sounds, and the engineer can read the fault directly from the cabin. He has roughly 5 minutes from the alarm sounding to acknowledge it. If he does not, the alarm escalates, the engineer's call goes out, and it sounds in every cabin and on the bridge, waking up everybody from the chief engineer down. The duty rotates between the second, third, and fourth engineers, with each one taking a night in turn. A Maersk container ship, an NYK line car carrier, and a Hapag-Lloyd box ship are all running essentially the same regulatory framework here, but the standing orders, the exact escalation timing, and the chief engineer's house rules vary noticeably from one fleet to the next. A Maersk standing order set tends to be one of the more detailed in the industry, while some smaller operators rely much more on the chief engineer's personal judgment. Let me tell you what happens when he has to go down. When an alarm comes in that needs an actual physical response, the routine is precise, and it has been written by 100 years of engineers learning the hard way. First, he calls the bridge. He tells the officer of the watch that he is entering the machinery space, where he is going, and roughly how long he expects to be. Then, at the entrance to the engine room or at the engine control room console, he activates the dead man alarm. The dead man is a countdown timer, usually set somewhere between 3 and 27 minutes depending on the system, with 20 minutes being a common standard. Once it is running, it has to be reset manually by pressing a button on one of the signal light columns positioned on every platform of the engine room. If he does not press the button before the timer runs out, a warning light flashes for an extension period. If he still does not press it, the full dead man alarm sounds in the engine room, on the bridge, and through the entire accommodation block, and the rest of the crew knows immediately that something has happened to the duty engineer down below. Most veteran second engineers will tell you the dead man is not paranoia. It is the difference between waking up with a story and not waking up at all. The bridge also calls down every 15 to 30 minutes during a round to verify he is alive and conscious. These are 2 layers of safety, redundant on purpose. It is worth pausing here because this is a long way from the 1970s tanker engine room when 3 engineers stood continuous 4 on, 8 off watches around the clock, each accompanied by a duty oiler, and nobody slept while the main engine was turning. The whole shape of engine room life today is built on automation that simply did not exist then. Let me now get into the small habits that make a UMS night work. The system on paper is impressive, but what actually makes it run is a set of small personal habits, repeated every night by the duty engineer himself. Get any of these wrong, and the system stops protecting you. The first habit is the early evening round. Before switching to UMS mode, the duty engineer and the duty oiler walk the entire engine room together with the company's checklist on a clipboard. It is a paper copy, almost universally, even in 2026. They check expansion tank levels on the freshwater systems, sump levels on the main engine and the generators, fuel oil and lube oil day tank levels, bilge wells, sounding caps, the position of every watertight door, and the acetylene and oxygen mains. They are not just looking for problems, they are trying to anticipate what could go wrong while they sleep. After the physical round, there is the virtual round. This is a craft habit. Experienced engineers, on their way back up to the accommodation, mentally retrace every step they just took. They walk the engine room again in their head, looking for what they might have missed. The instinct comes with years of practice, and the engineers who develop it tend to be the ones who get promoted. Then there is the boiler suit on the cabin door. It is hung clean, with boots laced underneath, and a hard hat and ear defenders on the hook above. An alarm at 3 in the morning becomes a 60-second sprint to the engine room, not a search for trousers. There is also the standing orders folder pinned to the bulkhead by the cabin door. Each chief engineer writes his own. It covers what to do if a generator drops, who to call, when to wake the chief, and when not to. There is the phone by the bunk, a direct line to the bridge officer of the watch. There is the late evening round, around 11 at night, which is a final walk through the engine room before sleep. There's the weekly test of the extension alarm panel, because if the panel does not work, none of this works. And there are the small personal things. A family photo is taped to the bulkhead. A kettle sits on the cabin desk. There is the specific brand of instant coffee that survives every contract because the engineer who is up in the middle of the night needs something hot to walk down with. Any veteran chief engineer who has run unattended engine rooms for years will tell you the same thing about sleep. You never really sleep deeply at sea. One ear stays on the panel. It is half sleep and half listening. And honestly, when you watch a good duty engineer run a quiet night, the rhythm of it is its own kind of beautiful. Now, look, this would not be a life at sea video if we were not completely straight with you about both sides. So let us be honest.
Sleep fragmentation is the central unromantic truth of this job. Under the International Standards of Training, Certification and Watchkeeping Convention from 2010 and the Maritime Labor Convention from 2006, every seafarer is entitled to a minimum of 10 hours of rest in any 24-hour period, divisible into no more than 2 blocks, one of which must be at least 6 hours long. They are also entitled to 77 hours of rest in any 7-day period. That is the law. But unattended engine room operation by its nature can interrupt that protected 6-hour block. An alarm in the middle of the night, such as a high temperature alert on a purifier, a low-level alarm on a freshwater tank, or a false trigger on a bilge float switch, means the engineer is out of bed, down 6 decks, into a 110 decibel engine room, often for a fault that takes 20 minutes to clear. The Maritime Labor Convention and the International Transport Workers Federation agreements explicitly call out unattended operation as a category where compensatory rest is mandatory. In practice, on a tightly run schedule, that compensatory rest is sometimes more theoretical than real. The mental side is harder. Studies have consistently shown that seafarers experience higher rates of depression, anxiety, and burnout than the general working population. One peer-reviewed systematic review noted specifically that suicidal thoughts appear to be more frequent in workers on container ships than on other vessel types. Long contracts of 4 to 9 months are common. A 2024 review of the Seafarers Happiness Index noted that contracts of up to 9 months are widely seen as too long to sustain good mental and physical health, even where they technically comply with labor convention limits. The duty engineer who handles that alarm at 3 in the morning has likely also watched his children grow up over a video app on a connection that drops every time the ship rolls badly or enters a Norwegian fjord. He has missed birthdays, anniversaries, and funerals. Any veteran chief engineer who has done 20 years of this will tell you plainly, the cabin alarm follows you home. They sit at the kitchen table on leave, a delivery truck reverses outside, and they twitch. The hearing fades, gradually, year by year, from a career spent near a 2-stroke main engine. The back gives way from years of climbing engine room stairs at speed, and the shallow, half-listening sleep does not always come off when the contract ends. Let me tell you where this is all heading. The automation curve keeps bending. The Norwegian autonomous container ship Yara Birkeland, launched in 2021, is one of the first commercial vessels designed to operate without a permanent crew on short coastal routes. The Antonia Maersk and her sister ships in the methanol dual-fuel class are the new generation of deep-sea container ships, 350 meters long, with a capacity of 16,520-foot containers and with engines that switch from fuel oil to green methanol at the touch of a button. The duty engineer's job on a vessel like that is shifting steadily toward managing more sophisticated systems and more software, not less. Remote engine room monitoring is another piece of it. Maersk in Copenhagen, Hapag-Lloyd in Hamburg, and NYK in Tokyo all now run shore-based fleet operations centers that watch engine parameters in real time across hundreds of ships. A Maersk chief on a Triple E ship is now coordinating with a Copenhagen shore team. An NYK chief is in the loop with a Tokyo operations cell. A Royal Navy Marine engineering officer on a Type 23 frigate is tied in with a Portsmouth Fleet operations desk. The boundary between ship and shore, which used to be absolute, is becoming porous. But, and this is the part that is genuinely worth noting, despite every piece of automation that has come and will come, the industry has not removed the duty engineer from the nighttime loop and probably never will. Japanese operators like NYK, MOL, and K-Line have invested heavily in engine room digitalization, sometimes earlier than European operators. Scandinavian operators like Stena have led the way on hybrid and battery propulsion in coastal trades. None of them have taken the human off-duty in the middle of the night. Because when something genuinely goes wrong, you still need a person who knows that specific ship. So here is the picture. When you put it all together, a 1,000-foot container ship at 3 in the morning is not held together by a crowd of people. It is held together by one person sitting in a small cabin with a panel of green lights 6 feet from his pillow, a paper checklist signed at 5 o'clock, a dead man timer counting down somewhere on a floor plate, and the chief engineer's standing orders pinned to the bulkhead by the cabin door. He is half asleep and half listening, and there is something quietly remarkable about that. 1,000 feet of steel and machinery and cargo, all of it depending on one person not quite sleeping in a small cabin somewhere above the waterline. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to Life at Sea for a lot more content just like this. And if you have ever stood an unattended engine room watch, worked a duty engineer rotation, or known somebody who did, drop it in the comments below. I would genuinely love to hear it. Thanks for watching.